you people to understand.
Tell them that we ballin'.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Yo bande, yo bande.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Yo bande, yo bande. I am a true born Belizean.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we ballin'.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we ballin'.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Yo bande, yo bande.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Yo bande, yo bande.
Tell them that we ballin'.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Yo bande, yo bande.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Yo bande, yo bande. I am a true born Belizean.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we ballin'.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we ballin'.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Yo bande, yo bande.
Tell them that we ballin'.
Yo bande, yo bande.
And greetings again to another episode of Navel String Connections. I'm Bilal Morris, live here from my studio in Los Angeles. And we want to say that this show is sponsored by the Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations. Our producer is Noor Mohammed. And our executive producer is XTV. And across the country of Belize, wherever you live, wherever you are. And again, we want to invite you to tell one. This is the Belizean show in the Belizean diaspora, bridging that gap between Belizeans at home and abroad. And today we don't necessarily have a guest. We want to sort of discuss and talk about the Caribbean, critical issues confronting the Caribbean today, as well as Central America. We want to talk about the recent blockade of Cuba and the recent U.S. imposition of drastic measures against the country of Cuba. We knew that from the beginning of the attack on Venezuela, which is also a partner to Belize and have supported Belize over the years economically. Cuba has also been a big supporter of Belize. And we want to give Belizeans a better understanding of the history of the Belize-Cuba relations. A lot of Belizeans are not in tune with the historical history, the historical aspects of the Belize-Cuba relationship, as well as the Belize-Venezuela history. And a lot of our people are not necessarily educated on international relations in that way. Are they to be blamed? No. We expect, when we look at the social media, we expect to see a lot of the responses that are coming from Belizeans when it comes to this recent Trump administration actions of measures against the country of Cuba, as well as the measures that was made against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, where we saw the ousted of the Venezuelan President Maduro, and these actions have shocked a lot of people in Central America, as well as the Caribbean. We have been to today, where we are seeing new political movements that is affecting the Caribbean, that is affecting Central America come to be. And again, we know that Belize stands at the crossroads of Belize and the United States. Again, the relationships between the diplomatic relations between Belize and the United States. We have to understand that that also plays a very, very key role and very instrumental role in how does Belize survive as an independent nation within this global, this powerful global um, uh, tug and war that we see going on, in where a superpower like the United States is being aggressive in pushing its hegemony in the region. We have seen American presidents come and go. We have lived through them from the days of President Carter to Reagan to Bill Clinton, all the way to Barack Obama, and now we are living through the presidency. Assad Schuman, who has been Assad Schuman, who has been the one that has rang the bell and has raised the flag about what is happening with the Belize-Cuba relations. We have seen him coming to the forefront as he did with the Palestinian issues, and coming to the forefront in sort of raising the attention of the Belizean people in trying to give an understanding of where we stand and how we play out. We have seen the Belize Prime Minister Johnny Briceño, visited the CARICOM 58 CARICOM meeting that is held. I think it is in St. Kitts. And we have seen also the role, we want to also talk about the role that countries like Trinidad has played in this whole global Caribbean aspect, and how CARICOM is faring at this time. Is CARICOM united in its as a united front in supporting each other? How does one country like Trinidad, who has more aligned itself with the United States foreign policy, and we know that there are other Caribbean countries that have aligned themselves. We know that there are Central American countries like our neighbor Guatemala, who claims Belize, who has a long-standing claim in Belize, which is now at the Hague, at the United Nations, at the International Court of Justice to be heard. We want to look at those two. We want to look at Belize's relations with Guatemala and that long-standing claim, and how the global aspect of international relations is playing out with the Guyana, Venezuela, because Venezuela is also a country that claimed Belizean territory. And though we have got a lot of support from Venezuela, Guyana as a Caribbean nation, or sister or brotherly CARICOM nation, Guyana, also was had a long-standing claim of Venezuela claiming Guyana. And so we want to look at those two parallels, because we need to understand where we stand, and we need to bring history. We need to bring back the historical context into this present day dialogue, into this present day conversation of left wing and right wing and center, left, right, and center, and where do we stand as a Belizean people, right? In terms of, we look at this Belize Caribbean relations, Belize Cuba relations, Belize Central American relations, and Belize US relations, United States relationship. How do we, as this small little independent nation, where do we stand within this global, this whole global uh, political war, because it is a war, global political war that is going on. Does our leaders, present day leaders who leads Belize today, are they making the right decisions in terms of their international foreign policy, right? Or what kind of foreign policy do Belize have to make, have to stand on in this present day situation? And as we know, the Trump administration of the United States has brought a whole new Cold War to the whole forefront, where the war and immigrants in the United States is on. There is a whole change in the Caribbean and in Central America in terms of the has been able to contain one of the notorious drug cartels leaders. Mexico is stepping up its game, trying to fight drugs on its own front. But we are looking at how these nations uh, join the so-called U.S. war on drugs, and what are the measures that we take. Belize in its own self. What has been Belize's policy in this war? These young black men who are impacted and affected by the war on drugs, how they have been marginalized and disenfranchised in this whole situation. Um, these are spill-off effects. These things does not happen in a vacuum. Why do our young men or young black Belizean men, and we can say our young Belizean men from all ethnic groups, why do they get involved uh, in this whole cartel narcotic trafficking? Is it because of the poverty in Belize itself, where young men and women cannot find meaningful employment? Why do they make themselves willing targets uh, of, 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 um, of this so-called war on drugs, which is playing out very, very big in Belize? As we know, the cartels have even impacted and affected even the governments themselves across the Caribbean and Central America. How do we deal with this? And as I said, does Belize have a foreign policy itself of how it uh, it deals with these Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations? We want to thank the Ministry of Diaspora Relations for bringing the show to the Belizean diaspora itself. And the show has been aired for quite a few years now. And we know that there are a lot of Belizeans who, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, across the world, where they view the show. We know that they are becoming regular viewers of Navel String Connection. And the purpose of Navel String Connection is really to connect the dots, to bridge that gap that exists between Belizeans at home or abroad. We are one Belize, those at home and those abroad. But at the same time, there are still issues. There are still critical issues that confronts us living in two different worlds. All right, they're critical issues, and Navel String Connections' objective is to hopefully bring those voices in the Belizean diaspora. We have been able to interview and bring to the forefront for Belizeans both at home and abroad to see and to hear dynamic Belizeans who are the movers and shakers of where they live abroad. Students, politicians, engineers, artists, promoters, organizers, activists, educators, scientists. We have brought these people, Belizeans, who are very skilled people living abroad, as well as we have also featured Belizeans on the ground, engineers, educators, activists, organizers of constructive events to help Belize develop it itself. And when we talk about how do we develop Belize, Belizeans at home and abroad play a very important role in developing Belize and have been developing Belize, but particularly the role the diaspora plays in the development of Belize, the role the diaspora plays in the development of Belize. And we want to underscore that very important point about what is the purpose of Navel String Connection. Why are we here? Why do we do the show? And we hope that our viewers and our listeners may be able to get a better understanding over the last 3 years that we have been airing Navel String Connection, that we can hear those voices from across distant shores, and that we have been able to develop Belize throughout that period of time. And our records show that there has been significant gains in the terms of not only remittances that Belizeans send at home to help their loved ones, but there has been also Belizeans who have repatriated back to their home country, Belize, and are now working on the forefront, on the ground in Belize, in helping develop in Belize. After many years, they have spent their years here and have educated themselves and have built their careers, have actually returned home. Belizeans, there are quite a few, have done that over the years. Over the last 20 years, 10 years, Belizeans have have went back home to Belize and have been intricately working into the economic, social, political, and other areas of Belize, helping to develop the country. So there's no doubt about that. And the record, there's a record that shows that. There's the evidences that can prove that Belizeans are on the ground. And we don't have to make a whole list of names of those Belizeans. As well as we have Belizeans who are becoming new diaspora, Belizeans who have migrated out of Belize to seek a better life. Anyway, I think the major international objective of a human being is to go and find where you can make it, where you can develop wherever you live. The human being wherever you live. The human being wherever they go, they have an undeniable right to live there. Once they respect the international laws of that country when it comes to migration and immigration, right? And so we want to highlight that. We want to talk about how Belize itself is affected by immigration itself. Does Belize have an immigration policy? Does it has an anti-immigrant stand? No, we don't. Belize does not have an anti-immigration stand because Belize have accepted Central American refugees running in from the civil wars in the 1980s. Belize have accepted a mass amount of Central American refugees who have been living there for decades and have found a new life. And so Belize also is a country that has opened its doors to immigrants, and those very immigrants have helped develop Belize itself. We have to say that. Just like in the United States, immigrants have helped develop the United States, immigrants have also helped develop Belize that has come from all over the world, not only from the Central American republics, but from all over the world, and has become an intricate part in the development of the nation state of Belize itself. And instead of saying that, we want to look at those throughout the show. We want to look at those aspects, those key points of naval stream connections. This Belizean diaspora showing in the Belizean diaspora. We want to address these things and have a better understanding. So for audience and our viewers can have a better understanding and educate ourselves as to those things. As for me, I am still learning. I have 30 years of activism in the Los Angeles Belizean community. And there is a large body of work there for me. But I myself, with the changing political dynamics, with the changing political atmosphere, I myself have to learn the new times and what is affecting the new times, peoples in these new times, those changing political systems and norms, and countries change their policies, as we are seeing with the United States, right? The United States is making a major shift towards shutting down its borders, or because its immigration policy has been broken for such a long time. Belize itself has a broken immigration policy. What do Belize do? How does it fix its borders? We can look at the United States and say, well, the Trump administration is really harsh on immigrants, but they have made tremendous strides in helping to fix its broken immigration system. And there are reports that are coming out that it is much better now. There is not a free-for-all coming across the borders into the United States anymore, because the Trump administration has implemented its policies. May we want to call it draconian or not. It's raids attacking immigrants in the United States. and collecting them. The policy of let us know you are illegal here, go home to your country and then come back the right way. That has been a clear policy. That has been a clear policy for the Trump administration. Some people don't agree with that. Why don't we keep the people who are here in the United States illegally? Why don't the United States implement a policy like other presidents and administrations have done, right, to keep those people here? Why let them go back and have to come back again in the right way, as I said? But it's their policy. And whether we agree with it or not, we have to be able to comply with the policies of the government, because it's a government that was voted into power, whether we like it or not. It was voted into power, and it's executing these measures. I myself came to the United States as an immigrant and came in the proper way. But even those of us who have become naturalized citizens of the United States, as myself, we also have to take heed and be very careful in terms of the measures the Trump administration will be making, in terms of even that will affect naturalized immigrants in the United States. And there's a lot to say, and there is a lot to talk about today is Farmers Navel String Connection. But what we want to go and talk about very seriously is the crisis that is affecting the Caribbean country of Cuba. And we can't say that, well, Cuba is a communist country and we don't want to live. It's not about that. It's not about who is communist and who is capitalist, or who is this and who is that. The point of the matter is that that's a neighbor. As just as we have Guatemala is a neighbor who claims Belizean territory, we also have to have diplomatic relations with the Republic of Guatemala. We have to do business with them, and Belize have been able to do business. Belize trade with them. The government of Belize has to deal with the government of Guatemala, and vice versa. And how do we coexist? How do we coexist in this world without having to exercise our might in a way to make it right? To use might, military power and things of the sort to get our way and to make our policies in the international policies, make it law and to enforce it. There is a rule of law. The United Nations have laid down rules of law. And to give a brief history of Belize-Cuba relationship, we have to understand that when Belize was, when the progressive leaders of Belize, led by George Cadle Price and many of his cabinet ministers, those who were with him at the time, Assad Schuman, who is a man that is at the forefront, waking us up, keeping us informed of these issues, international issues that is affecting us. Recently, the one with Cuba was also part of that struggle for independence. C.L.B. Rogers, the outstanding Belizean diplomat, who was also a minister, an ambassador to the United Nations, right? Those people who fought for Belize's independence, we cannot forget them. And in this present crisis now, because we have to understand that who is it in the nation, in the World League of Nations, that supported Belize in its independence in 1981? Most famously was the country of Cuba, was the government of Cuba, under the leadership of Fidel Castro, President Fidel Castro. Outrightly, where we had nations that did not support, but unanimously, there was only about 4 nations or 3 nations that did not support Belize independence, and rightfully so. The United States government was one of those nations that did not support Belize independence because it had an alliance with Guatemala, which claims our territory. We have to understand the history of the Belize, Guatemala, Anglo-Guatemalan claim and the role the United States played. At the time, President Kennedy, the Kennedy administration was in power, and it actually had an issue. The blockade against Cuba was going on for quite a while. The Cuban Missile Crisis, where we had the Cold War going on with the Soviet Union and the United States, where you find that the Kennedy administration, after the ousted of its I would say its puppet, dictator, Bautista of Cuba, after he was ousted, the U.S.-backed leader of Cuba at the time, when he was overthrown by Fidel Castro and the Che Guevara movement, the Kennedy administration made sure that it had went to work in trying to fix this relationship. And what we saw was the international policy, a long-standing international policy of trying to overthrow the leadership of President Fidel Castro at the time. And so we saw where many Belizeans don't know this piece of history, but the Bay of Pigs invasion, where the Kennedy administration was launching to overthrow the Fidel Castro government in Cuba, trained anti-Castro Cubans on the soil of Guatemala, as in return they would give Guatemala, by Guatemala allowing these anti-Castro Cubans and what many would call mercenaries, which will then will lead invasion against on Cuba to overthrow the Cuban government. They were trained on Guatemalan soil with the acceptance by the Guatemalan government that the Kennedy administration made a deal that it will give Belize to Guatemala at the time. And because the Bay of Pigs invasion failed, that deal never did went through, and President Kennedy later, as we know, was assassinated, right? But we have to know, Belizean students of history, we have to know these things. Many of us, we get up and we say things without understanding that historical context of the role the Belize-U.S. relationships, the Belize-Cuba relationship. And so we know that there has been a blockade against Cuba for many years by the United States that has brought that nation to its knees in a way. But that nation has persevered. It has survived in a wonderful way. Now, with the coming in of the Trump administration, that has intensified. The blockade has been there throughout all these American presidents that has come to power. But it is now at a critical stage now in the Trump administration, who has made no bones about its strategy to overthrow the government of Cuba. When we see the recent movement by Marco Rubio in looking at Cuba as a country that they look at that is involved with terrorism and all of that, we have to understand the historical context of this crisis that is happening in Cuba. It did not just happen in a vacuum. There is a history there. And where does Belize stand in this history? We know, as I remember Assad Schuman said way back when he was with SPARE, the Society for the Promotion of Education and Research, and our organization brother brought him to his SPARE to Los Angeles, and he spoke at a Pathfinder forum, which was attended by mostly Central American refugees in Los Angeles. And he said that the Price administration at the time had to be very careful how they were looked at by the Cold War was going on between the Soviet Union and the United States. And so we have to understand that countries have their foreign policy. And that was the foreign policy that had been played out at the time, right? And that is the foreign policy that has been the United States foreign policy in the Caribbean, in Central America ever since. And so to give you some kind of background historical context to the Belize-Cuba relationship and how it stands, where does Belize stand in this? We have to also look at how the government of Cuba supported Belize independence, where the United States government either it abstained or it did not vote, along with the nation of Israel, the government of Israel, as well as Guatemala. And there was another Central American nation that did not its independence. I think that nation could have been Salvador, right? And we have to look at the civil wars that was going on in our backyard, where Belize had to accept those 40,000 Central American refugees. It was all a part of the Cold War. It was all a part of this war on communism, war on socialism, and that was the United States foreign policy. Seeing that the Soviet Union at the time, which is now Russia, which has now merged into Russia, these were the two superpowers that was jostling for control of these countries and their governments. And this was international politics. This was what was playing out. And so we Belize, we have to understand, we have to have some kind of historical context, some kind of background information of where we are, because we do not exist in Belize as a vacuum. We are surrounded by nations. And so that is a brief historical context in which Belize-Cuba relation, Belize-United States relation, but we have to always look as a spillover effect where Belize was told by the United Nations, UNDP, to accept 40,000 refugees. Did Prime Minister Price, did he have any choice to do that? We don't. We can say, well, he could have said no. He could have said, oh, he could have said he did say yes and accepted it. And now we are living in that political atmosphere. We are living with that. But where does Cuba stand? In coming to power, again, as another added point to the historical context, as the coming to power of the Musa administration in 1998, Belize extended its international support and connection with the Republic of Cuba wholeheartedly by visiting, Prime Minister Musa visited Cuba when Fidel Castro, the president of Cuba, was alive, and further established that relationship. It was not a good thing in the sight of the United States to see something like that. They would have preferred, and they have always been cautioned in Belize to be very careful about this relationship that it has with Cuba. But nevertheless, the Musa administration visited Cuba, and there were diplomatic relations, extensions of that diplomatic relation that was made with the disapproval of the United States. And in return, Cuba supported Belize with doctors and helping Belize in infrastructure development and in the medical field, and in also many having Belizean students come to Cuba to study medicine and agriculture and many other different forms of sciences that they could necessarily take back to Belize to help develop Belize. So Cuba has played a very, very instrumental role in the development of Belize. Whether we want to look at it as a communist nation or socialist, we have dealt with Cuba nevertheless. Belize have been able to establish diplomatic relations with Cuba nevertheless. And so we saw that Cuba has helped Belize in sports. It has helped Belize in its medical infrastructure development. We know that we have a very poor medical system that has not served the Belizean people justly. And Cuba has sent in doctors into Belize. Whether we want to say, oh, those doctors are this and those doctors are that. Nevertheless, I have seen those doctors work across the nation of Belize, being a journalist myself, and has been able to do investigative reporting as a journalist in Belize. I've seen the work those Cuban doctors have done. And I can say that they have helped Belize tremendously in its very, very uh, disarray medical system that is not really structured in a way to serve the Belizean people. Cuba has even helped Belize build homes. It has done a lot of things in infrastructure development, continue to do so. But particularly, we heard the cry of Belizean students in Cuba who are crying who have cried out for support for their cause. These are medical students that today, many of these students are working in the Carl Hushner Hospital. These are doctors. Belize have doctors that were trained in Cuba, have got their medical training in Cuba, that are practicing medicine across the country of Belize that came from different parts of the country of Belize itself. Belize have had agriculturists in animal husbandry and all forms of agriculture who was trained in Cuba, educated there, where they would not have necessarily got an opportunity to come to the United States, to go to an Ivy League school to study these things. Those who were able to come to the United States and study medicine are fortunate enough, but there are a lot of Belizean students who were accepted by Cuba, the medical schools in Cuba, and have returned to Belize to develop their country. These same students, because it has been an ongoing diplomatic relation in the area of medicine, and we have heard on the news in Belize that are coming out that these Belizean students are very severely affected because of the intensification of the pressure that has been put on Cuba with its fuel shortages and so forth, and the increase of pressure with the blockade is devastating the nation state of Cuba, and therefore those Belizean students who are there are also being affected. We don't know if this continues, if it increases, if it gets worse, whether those students will have to cut their medical training and their university education in whatever fields that they are in Cuba, may need to cut it short and return home to Belize itself. We don't know where this is going. And so today's show, we want to highlight that. We want to speak to that particular crisis because we are fundamentally affected here as Belizeans. We are affected even if we live in Belize or we don't. We have Belizeans living abroad. So where do we play? Why are we concerned? What do we care? Belizeans abroad don't really live there. Yes, we care. Because we want various Belizeans from different political persuasions in Belize who say, put your political affiliations, and your political ideologies aside. Think of your nation, Belize, and your people who are living in the diaspora in Cuba, students who have been affected, who are being affected by this present Trump administration policy of increasing pressure on Cuba, and ultimately the aim is to maybe to overthrow the government of Cuba and to what they would call the United States government called the stabilization in the region. And whether we like that or not, the United States government is implementing its foreign policy. And so how do we as a country, as a nation, Belize, how do we survive? How do we stay alive? How do we, without having to, as Assad rightfully said, the Price administration in the 1980s was trying not to come under the eyes of President Reagan. Now Belize is in a position now, we are trying not to come under the eyes of President Donald Trump. and to shuffle his feathers, so to speak, and then cause our nation to be looked at as siding with this one and siding with this nation. But at the same time, we are an independent nation. We are Belize is a democratic country, and we hope that we are treated as such, as a democratic country that has elections, and all of its prime ministers has been democratically elected in the region, that we are respected as a nation state by the United States government in what position we take. And in this case, that we continue to keep the diplomatic relationship with Cuba. We continue to do that. And Belize continues to do that. And let's talk about then, we will take a short break. And when we come back, we want to talk about Prime Minister Johnny Briceña's visit to the CARICOM, to the recent CARICOM meeting, who at the time, all these Caribbean leaders that came to the forefront, and they were looking at things with what happened to Venezuela, with the leadership of Venezuela being removed, and also the present state of Belize Venezuela relationship, and how did our prime minister, how did he coexist in that atmosphere of Caribbean leaders, and at the same time the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio was also present in that meeting. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay tuned.
Belize my home, my native land. to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we ballin'.
You're banded, you're banded.
Tell them that we ballin'.
You're banded, you're banded.
And welcome back. Greetings from Navel String Connections. I'm Bilal Morris, live in my studio here in Los Angeles. Navel String Connection is a XTV production. Our sponsors are the Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations. We want to thank Minister Marla, a vibrant, young, dynamic Minister of Tourism in Belize today, who is doing tremendous good work, very constructive good work. We want to big up our brother and send greetings to him. And I myself, as a Muslim, I say I want to the entire Belizean nation state, our Belizeans from all walks of life across Belize itself. We want to send greetings of peace and love to you. From Navel String Connections, I'm Bilal Morris. Our show is produced by Nuri Muhammad, and the man behind our control today is Harlan. We're happy to have our brother, Los Angeles is the home of the largest abroad, living in the UK, Canada, the Central America republics, the Caribbean, and all across the world, Africa. And most of all, we want to greet our brothers and sisters in Cuba, our Belizean students who are studying there, who are conducting their university education. And we pray that God Most High may bring them some blessings and that may ease the pressure and that they may be able to complete their university education in medicine and in agriculture, whatever discipline that they're studying, that they will bring back home to the country of Belize to help develop Belize. We want to send greetings and blessings to them to stay strong and to hold on. I do feel that things will be better. We pray that these nations can talk nicely to each other, that we can understand each other in terms of we don't want no war, we don't want no conflicts, we don't want no violence. We are human beings and nations, leagues of nations that can conduct ourselves in a humane fashion. And no matter how large we are or how small we are, we should be able to talk across to each other from a position of strength, despite of how small or how big we are. And saying that, I want to discuss and talk about the Prime Minister Johnny Briceña's visit to the CARICOM meeting. I think it's the 58th CARICOM Heads of Government meetings. I think that is supposed to be held in St. Kitts. And we have looked at Facebook and social media, and we have seen the Belizean Prime Minister as he lobby and he diplomatically with his foreign minister, Minister Fonseca, as they meet and greet all these different leaders from the Caribbean. So CARICOM is a powerful bloc in the Caribbean. Belize trades with CARICOM. CARICOM head nations trade with each other. There is a tremendous amount of trade that goes on between CARICOM and Central America, CARICOM and the world. And CARICOM is a body, a united body. But CARICOM at this time is facing some political pressures because of this crisis. This new Trump administration foreign policy strain to meet the U.S. foreign policy measures on immigration, on drugs, fighting drugs, the so-called war on drugs, fighting terrorism, and all these things, these policies that the United States foreign policies has implemented and has asked for Caribbean nations to add on to help support by offering their militaries, offering their political minds. And recently with the ouster of President Maduro of Venezuela, we saw the Caribbean nation of Venezuela supporting that. The Caribbean and his foreign minister, Minister Fonseca, visits is involved with the CARICOM heads of government meeting. We also want to look at the ouster of President Maduro from Venezuela and the state of affairs in Venezuela at this time. As we know, and I don't think that a lot of Belizeans know, that Belize have had diplomatic relations with Venezuela, and I think continues to have diplomatic relations with Venezuela, despite of the fact that Venezuela has laid a long-standing claim to Guyana, to the country of Guyana, which is a Caribbean name and a member of CARICOM. How do we, as a Belizean nation state, how do we look at that when we ourselves have a neighbor, a Central American neighbor, Guatemala, the Republic of Guatemala, that also have claimed Belizean territory for centuries? How do we look at that? And how do we look at what is our relationship with Venezuela, despite of the fact that it sits in the same position like Guatemala that claims our territory? Nevertheless, Belizean governments have gone on, despite of that, to support Venezuela, to support the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela under President Hugo Chavez, who passed away, unfortunately, and so suddenly, right? Belize have received a lot of oil charity from lots of loans, not necessarily loans, but grants offered to the Belizean government. And we can talk about the relationship that has existed and will continue to exist with Belize, despite of that, and despite of the United States government disapproval of Belize for having diplomatic relationship with Venezuela, ever since the president, the late Hugo Chavez, President Hugo Chavez, was the president, and with the ongoing President Maduro government. Now, with the ouster of President Maduro and the government that stands, how does Belize continue to exist as a partner and as a supporter of both Venezuela and now we see Cuba, right? So we in a tight spot. Belize is riding a tight rope. I say we because we as Belizeans are intricately connected to the country of Belize. And what happened recently with the ouster of President Maduro, we also want to bring into light what is going on in that CARICOM heads of meeting. Many Belizeans don't know that we have a Belizean, Dr. Carla Barnett, that holds a very high position in CARICOM. She is also present at the CARICOM meeting. And we saw recently where the Trinidadian Prime Minister, where she outrightly criticized the Prime Minister in her support of that. And so we're seeing where there's a left, right, and center that is playing out with the political alliances in CARICOM. And so CARICOM has been shaken up. And we can go back in history and we can look at a parallel where the Reagan administration was imposing its international foreign policy to oust the Prime Minister of Grenada, Maurice Bishop, who was seen as socialist. And we saw the invasion, hence the invasion of Grenada and the toppling of the Bishop government, right? And what followed. We also saw the Reagan administration, implementing its foreign policy in Nicaragua with the Sandinistas around the same time, in the so-called Cold War that was going on. And so when we look at that parallel then, and we look at the parallel and its relation, its relative situation now, it's like we are looking at a very similar pattern that is in playing out. Now it's been Venezuela and Cuba. During the 1980s, under the Reagan administration of the United States government, it was Nicaragua and Grenada and those countries in Guatemala and Salvador that was having leftist, so-called leftist, uh, uh, so-called leftist rebels fighting to overthrow U.S.-backed governments. And the Reagan administration was seriously at war. It was seriously at war with in that region and in that particular time. I think we like that time to this time. We like that time to this time that we are facing now in 2026, right? We are liking that time to now, and we are seeing a similar pattern in the form of in now the Trump administration taking a very serious and draconian position in the Caribbean region, right? What Ronald Reagan used to call the president of the United States used to call the Caribbean Basin Initiative, right? That Caribbean Basin Initiative has been taken to a new level now. The United States have increased its power and its hegemony in the Caribbean region, and we are seeing these political tensions playing out. And we, from what we take a strong support for Cuba, it's gonna be very lukewarm. It's not gonna be a strong one because of their fear, and I use the word fear, of the international power structure, the international relations, and the power that the United States government put behind its international relations in this new diplomacy that is international relations in this new diplomacy that is playing out in the Caribbean and in Central America. She will discuss her position after the meeting, after the CARICOM heads of state meeting has culminated. And we are very curious to hear what she will say, what the Barbadian Prime Minister will say. But we know that all these leaders have to be very diplomatic. They have to be very diplomatic. At the same time, they show with the presence of this American Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, president, they have to make sure that they are keeping at the same time, while they're in support of Cuba and Venezuela, for some of them, they also have to make sure that they continue to strengthen their relationship with the United States government, which is a very important trading partner. As we know, when the United States, Belizeans have our phrase, when the United States sneeze, Belize catch pneumonia. We are intricately tied. Belize is intricately tied to the American economy. We have Belizeans in the diaspora who depend on that US dollar in support of their loved ones back home. The Trump administration understand these things. They know the role the Belizeans in the diaspora play. They know that they could cut off that lifeblood anytime that they choose. It's already been impacted. I know, I understand now that there have been an excise tax charge and remittances sent to Belize. It's not 2-to-1 people are getting anymore, right? I think there is a 0.25% tax that has been imposed on remittances now sending out of the United States to Belize, and in any part of the world, that the United States is making is sending a message that it is very strong on immigration and migration. Right? It is very, very strong on that we see that imposed tax imposed on remittances. But nevertheless, that lifeblood has not been cut off. And when we talk about a show like this, Navel String Connection, that bring those voices from across the Belizean diaspora, especially Belizeans, in the United States who are very plays a intricate role in the economic lifeblood and the bringing forth of currency exchange into the nation of Belize itself. That is very important. So we know that our leaders, the Belizean leaders, hold very highly the significant role the Belizean diaspora has played, is playing, and will continue to play in the development of Belize when it comes to remittances. The Belizean diaspora in the United States played a tremendous role. As some would say, it saved the Belizean economy during the pandemic. During the pandemic, it saved it because those remittances kept coming, where Belizeans, the pandemic impacted all nations. The world was impacted, and especially small economies like Belize was impacted. But it is the Belizean diaspora, as some has said. We don't have any factual evidence to this, but it is the Belizean diaspora that played a tremendous role in keeping the Belizean economy alive and kicking. And so there is a lot that is discussed at that CARICOM meeting. The role Caribbean nations play in the role the Caribbean diaspora has played. When you talk about Jamaica and Trinidad and Barbados and Guyana and all those countries. And just as we speak about Guyana, Belize just recently had a visit of President Ali from Guyana to Belize. That was a state visit. Very, very important, very instrumental in terms of the relationship between Belize and Guyana that hold very similar international relations, very, very similar things that are playing out with both Caribbean nations. And we saw that the country of Belize and the government of Belize and the people of Belize hosted the Guyanese president to Belize, and that Guyanese, he's presently at the CARICOM meeting, and so we are very excited in terms of the United States government play, despite of the fact of how very strict and serious the Trump administration has become. That they believe that these diasporas, these Caribbean diasporas, are very significant, and we hope that these CARICOM heads of state have made that a key and fundamental topic during their discussions in how, as a way forward, how would the Caribbean nations help to continue to hold a good relationship with the United States so that its diasporas can continue to support their economies. And that is very, very important. So we know that should be a key point of discussion between those Caribbean nations. And again, we want to say this is Naval String Connections. I am Bilal Morris. We are doing a sort of a historical, political, historical show today in giving some kind of understanding and historical context of what is happening in the Caribbean, Central America, in this present Trump administration government of the United States, the crisis unfolding in Cuba, the crisis that has unfolded in Venezuela, two of Belize's neighbors and trading partners, and that Belize holds diplomatic relationships with. We have to give some kind of historical context to this, because our people needs to understand, if it is not it presented to them in any form from their government, then we hope that we can give some kind of justice as a show on XTV. And the power of XTV is the voice. It is that other where you will find education and information where you will not necessarily find in any other media. where you will not necessarily find in any other media in Belize. The whole, the power of the Crema Mandala institution, as I like to say, it is an institution that was built from the United Black Association for Development, UBAD, into the Mandala newspaper, into Creme Radio in 1989, now into Creme Television and Radio, now XTV, right? A voice for the voiceless. Because we have to understand that in media, any part of the world, a lot of its people are locked out of information, right? People, the powers that be survives through keeping the populace ignorant. And so we have to help be one of the main purpose of XTV and its sister media that surrounds it, radio, television, and newspaper. SMART, and the whole role that Michael Ashcroft, the multinational, that for a lot of us have controlled, that we know have controlled the PUDP administrations, right? Have finance campaigns and so forth. And that we were happy for the sister to come onto the airwaves of XTV and to bring forth her truths, right? As a learned lawyer, former a practicing journalist in the past, and has been able to educate and inform the Belizean people through this medium called XTV and on this show called Navel String Connection, to educate you so that the people can take action in a democratic way in saying no to things to our government of Belize. Despite the fact we support our government in the terms of keeping Belize as a nation state, but if our government is not doing things that is right for the people, that the people have a right to be able to say, we don't like that, we are against that. And that's for all democratic societies. And so again, we want to thank our sister Audrey Matura for coming on and to speak to us and to speak to the Belizean people at home and abroad about the recent BTL crisis that was unfolding in Belize, that many Belizean workers at BTL was looking at their severance pay, and they were looking at their futures just disappearing in front of them. And we have seen that government has appeared to have listened. Government appears to have listened. We have seen the recent People's United Party meeting in Belmopan a couple of weeks ago, where various ministers spoke out against their dislike of the deal. Various ministers, we don't have to say those ministers' names, but they spoke out that they were not happy, and we know that the Belizean Prime Minister, Johnny Briceño, has heard that loud and clear, and that we hope that we will see a solution to the problem, and that the voice of the people will be the victor, that the voice of the people will be the victor. And with that, we want to say this is Navel String Connection. I am Bilal Morris, live from my studio here in Los Angeles. This is an XTV. This is an XTV production. Our producer is Nur Muhammad. This show is also sponsored by the Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations. And we want to invite Belizeans across the United States and in Belize who are watching the show, who are seeing the show and are hearing us. We want to invite you to tell one. Join.
I am a true Belizean.
Tell them that we born it.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born it.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born it.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we born it.
You're bande, you're bande.
Tell them that we born it.
You're bande, you're bande. I am a true Belizean.
Tell them that we born it.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born it.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born it.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we born it.
You're bande, you're bande.
Tell them that we born it.
You're bande, you're bande. I am a true Belizean.
Tell them that we born it.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born it.
I want you people to understand.
Alternative news events. Support our students studying in Cuba because they are under serious pressure right now in terms of their future, whether their future will be there to become doctors and engineers and agriculturists, that they will come back to Belize and help develop the country of Belize. And so we want to big time ask all Belizeans at home and abroad to keep supporting the Belizean students in Cuba and to stay alert and to try to understand the international relations that is going on that is causing this crisis so that you can better have a better understanding and to be very constructive citizens. And I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank our brother Harlan. And again, this show is sponsored by the Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations. Our producers, Noor Muhammad, the executive producers are XTV. We want to say thank you for watching.
I am a true Belizean.
Tell them that we born it.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born it.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born it.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell